welcome to another video. So today I would like to talk about the books that I've read in 2025 so far, and I have to do so pretty quickly because my camera is almost out of batteries and I don't have the time to charge it and then film again, and so it's gonna have to be less of a ramble than it usually is. Just a couple of things before we start talking about the books. I don't usually give bad reviews to books. They always oscillate between 3 and 5 stars, and I would say it's mostly 4 and 5 stars. I'm pretty generous with my ratings because if I'm not liking a book, I will just not finish it. I try not be too precious about it. I get very impatient, very annoyed. I get progressively angry, and it just makes me be in a really terrible mood. Yeah, I get affected by books. What do you want me to do? So if I'm just gonna be miserable reading a book, I just prefer not to read it, and I will DNF it. That's made me in the last few years a lot more careful with the books that I buy and the books that I don't buy, because I don't want to be spending money and wasting space in my house with books that I don't enjoy. So that's why I'm quite happy with every book that I finish, basically, because if not, I just wouldn't finish it. The other thing is that I don't usually read as much as it's gonna seem like I do with this list, because I have 16 books that I've read so far this year. That's gonna sound like a lot to some people and not a lot to other people. To me, it sounds like tons because I'm a very slow reader. But this year, I ran into like a lot of really good audiobooks, so I was able to read them, listen to them while I do chores, while I do groceries and all that, and so my book count is higher than normal. But just so you know, I'm usually like a 10-12 books a year kind of person, and that already seems like a lot considering how slow of a reader I am. After all, oh no, I just spilled the tea on myself. I really like this dress, and it's my mom's. Show must go on. I just realized that the books are all the way over there. Why am I so unprepared? So the first book that I read this year, and the first one that I'm going to talk about, is this one. It's called The Healing Season of Pottery in English. In Spanish, it's Historias del Taller de Cerámica Soyo. It's a bit of a different title, and it's by Yeon Somin. This is one of these comfort books that have gotten very, very trendy lately, and I understand why, because I don't know, because who doesn't want a hug in the shape of a book? This one in particular is about a young woman who is feeling a little bit lost in life. She's quit her job, she's really burned out, she doesn't really have a path that she's following at the moment, and then she randomly stumbles upon a ceramics workshop, and there she finds all of these different characters who are not really archetypical, not to me at least. They're not the archetypes that I'm used to. This book felt very realistic in the way that the characters didn't feel instantly likable, or they didn't feel like book characters. They felt like real people that you would be able to meet in a place like this. Some of them were easier to love than others, but in the end, it actually takes a little time to understand them, especially the main character. Sometimes when you meet a main character who is not doing great mentally in that moment, and they can be, and like most of what you see about them is them being a bit mopey, and it's hard to talk about this kind of thing. I think it's easier to be engaged with this kind of book if you are sympathizing with what the person's going through in that moment. I could talk about it for hours really, but what I liked about it the most was that it didn't romanticize the process of getting better. It's not that the main character was in such a bad place to begin with, but she wasn't doing great, and she wasn't doing great in a way that most of us could identify with. Just these moments in life where you're just not feeling it. You just don't have the motivation, and like nothing excites you. You're just a little bit down, and I just enjoyed it as like a bit of a, like I said, like a bit of a hug in the shape of a book, and it was great to start the year as well. So I'd probably recommend it for now that the academic year starts again after the holidays. September is like a second January, I guess, in terms of starting things, so good one. The next books that I read, actually I listened to, were audiobooks, so I don't have them physically. And they were both by Emily Henry. They were Book Lovers and People We Meet on Vacation. I think the narrators were really great in both of them. They were the Spanish narrators, so I don't know what the situation is with the ones in English. And the first one, if you don't know it, Emily Henry is obviously a very popular author, and she's very successful. But the first one, Book Lovers, is about a literary agent who's this cold, badass woman who's a bit scary, and she meets this guy who's like a cloudy personality editor, and it's a bit of a city versus small town. I enjoyed it. I wouldn't say, like, I wouldn't give it the Nobel Prize, but it's very interesting. It has very interesting ideas on people who put others first and have a hard time taking care of themselves and their own healing because they're always caring for others first. And I think that was the most interesting part, and her relationship with her sister, much, much more than the romance and the love story. And that's something that happens again in People We Meet on Vacation, in my opinion. And the second one is about two friends who go on trips during a few years of their youth and now have like established as adults, and they meet up again for another trip. And things were left a little bit weird between them because there's this like special sort of friendship that the book explores. I think this one was not as strong as Book Lovers in terms of the underlying themes. In both cases, the romance was the part that I cared the least about, and I don't mind. I like romance as a genre, but I think I just wasn't as like moved by it or anything. Even though this kind of book probably won't ever be my thing, I think I'm glad Emily Henry exists, and I'm glad she writes this kind of book. And I do recommend it if you're looking for an easy romance that will make you laugh at times and that probably will catch you off guard with how deep and how heartbreaking it might get at some point. And out of the romance literature that there is out there, this one's like funny, goofy, but not so silly that you want to throw the book off the balcony, so that's great. The next books that I want to talk about are actually a trilogy, and I also don't have them here because I also consume them in audiobook. And they are A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. Yeah, I'm late to the party. I am this kind of person who reads things when nobody's talking about them anymore. In case you don't know, this is the story about a girl named Pip who is doing this research for her school. And she decides to do it about a murder that happened a few years ago in her little town. This small town murder case is always something that I'm drawn towards in fiction. She's one of those people who's too smart for her own good, and she's very driven. I really, really, really love the character of Pip. I think Ravi is the sweetest sweetheart that's ever existed, and I love them both. I love Kara and I love Pip's family. I think there is a lot of very, very lovable characters in this story. I would say the second book is a little bit weaker, and the third one has the plot twist of the century, in my opinion. I think it's one of those that people will love or will hate. I haven't actually done much digging on what the general opinion was on this because, like I said, I think I read it a bit later. Like I read it quite a while after its biggest success. I know plot twist can be, yeah, like they're like a double-edged sword. They can really work out and they can really make a lot of sense, or they can just like throw you off the fiction completely. In this case, I thought it was insanely brave for a product that seems like it is a young adult fiction. I don't know, I recommend it, but I do recommend going through and reading the whole trilogy. I would say it's like a comfort crime until it's not. The next book on my list is Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. And I got to this book because of Taskmaster. If you don't know the show Taskmaster, it's absolutely brilliant. It's a comedy show. Watch it. It's for free on YouTube. Amazing, hilarious. And Richard Osman, the author, was one of the contestants in one of the last, I don't know what season, but he was in it. And I thought he was funny, and they kept mentioning that he was an author. And then I realized that he wrote one of these books that you always see in the bookstore. And it actually had caught my attention because there is a couple of old people, at least in the Spanish version, there's a couple of old people sitting on a bench, but it's clearly a crime story. And I thought, oh, I don't know, that sounds cute. The narrators of the Spanish version are adorable. There's two people playing old ladies, and they're absolutely fantastic. In case you don't know this book, it's a cozy crime with an adorable set of characters they have very, very distinct personalities. They absolutely feel like they're real, and I just really want to make them in real life. I know they're making a movie. The people that they've chosen to play the characters are not exactly the way I imagine them, except for Ben Kingsley. But I have hopes for it. I also listened to the audiobook of Mickey 7, which is the book that got adapted into Mickey 17, which you probably have heard of, which was released in theaters this year. This was a great listen. I loved it to bits. It's by Edward Ashton. It's by Edward Ashton. And it's about this man named Mickey who goes through a procedure that turns him into what we would call an expendable person. So he can just die and they basically bring him back to life every time. So he's used as, as an expendable human being in like a space mission. So this is a sci-fi book, and I thought I like the book a lot more, even though Robert Pattinson is incredible in this role. I think he's a completely different person. He doesn't look like himself. He doesn't sound like himself. And I think he does make a good Mickey, but I don't like most of the changes that they make in the movie, especially the villains. I find it ridiculous. I don't understand why. They kind of like steal the show, but in a bad way. And they make it feel a lot less, I don't know. In the book, Mickey is a goofball, but he's also a very profound character. He has a lot of very deep thoughts, even though he's also an absolute idiot. And he has a lot of really cool reflections that obviously you can get his thoughts, that his internal monologue in the movie. But it would be interesting to have been more faithful to the book in this case, I think, because I thought the movie was a lot less charming. Hi. If you think the light is different and the angle's different, or if there's any kind of like continuity error, that's because my camera ran out of batteries, even though I begged it not to. So I'm back a little later with a fresh 23% batteries. What the heck was I talking about then? Let me look at my notes. Okay, so the next book I listened to, so many audiobooks, like I said, is Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton. I don't know how to pronounce it. She's British, I'm pretty sure. So this book, like the title says, explores the interpretations and the ideas around love and different kinds of love as well, like friendship and family and romantic as well, through the eyes of Dolly herself since she was a little girl up until she's in her 30s. And obviously there is a lot of changes from when she was a teenager until she's a proper like grown-up woman. There's a lot of talk around the best relationship in the book being the one that she has with her best friend, and I would agree. It's the most complex one. It's the one that goes through the most highs and lows, and Dolly herself has a pretty, I don't know if I want to say toxic, because I feel like that word is very used and abused nowadays, and sometimes it's the right word for it to describe a relationship, and sometimes it isn't. But I think her approach to her relationship with man is probably not the healthiest. And I think a lot of us have a lot of these preconceived ideas about romantic love, and I think particularly for me, I'm from the same generation as her. I think we learned a lot of these ideas from movies and from books from that time. Early 2000s were interesting in terms of romantic relationship portrayals in fiction. I really enjoyed this audiobook. The narrator in Spanish again was awesome. I think it was hilarious at times, and I think it was heartbreaking at other times. It always caught me off guard. No matter how many times it was heartbreaking, it always caught me off guard the next time. And sometimes I was just listening to it in the metro and it would make me tear up, and that was, I had to stop it. And some of the times it just made me chuckle out loud. Her voice from the very beginning is very recognizable. I think it's a memoir. I don't know if I mentioned that, but I would very much like to read other things by her because I thought it was a very interesting point of view. It was very particular, and I like how much fun she made of herself. I loved her sense of humor. She sounds like a really cool person to have a drink with, honestly. The next book that I want to talk about, I do have a physical copy of, and it's Thunderhead by Miranda Darling. And I didn't mean to buy this book. I was in Australia and I wanted to buy a book by an Australian author because it's not that easy to find books by Australian authors over in Europe where I live. And I was looking for, you know, those little cards with recommendations from the staff that some bookshops have. So I was looking for one of those and I saw one about like a funny, silly, romantic story that was like upbeat and goofy, and I misread the title and I picked up the wrong book. So that recommendation card was not about this particular book, but that was a joy of a mistake. I really, really love this book. I don't know how to describe it other than saying it's about a woman who has... It's about a woman who is trapped in a complex domestic situation, and I feel like if I say anything more than that, I will spoil the goodness of it. It's written in a stream of consciousness kind of style, and it's very dreamy. It's very much like being in someone else's head. It doesn't feel like the author wants you to feel like you're in someone else's head. It feels like you actively are. And she's a very interesting character, Winona, and that's her name. The writer also seems like she's a very interesting person. I think she has training in strategy and defense, and there's a little bit of that in the book. Not really like plot-wise, but like to construct the character. And I am very happy that I picked it up by accident because I think it's a gem that I wouldn't have otherwise stumble upon. The next book on my list I read on my e-reader, and where do I put the thingamajig? And it's a small thing that nobody heard about called Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. In case you didn't know, this is the story of the Hunger Games that Haymitch participated in. And in case you don't know who Haymitch is, he was the mentor. He was Katniss Everdeen's mentor in the original trilogy. I didn't love this book. It feels like it's written not as well as the original trilogy. I really like Katniss's voice. I think she's a very strong main character, and I really love the Haymitch of the original books. And I know this is not the same person because he's gone through a lot of things, a lot of trauma to become the person he's become, and I think that was the part that I liked the most, other than the ending. Yeah, this book left me feeling pretty indifferent at times, and also it tore me to pieces in other moments, so it was a bit irregular for me. This book felt like it needed a couple of reviews. I don't think this was the perfect finished product. I think maybe it was a bit too rushed. I don't know the reason, but it didn't feel as round as the original ones. Also, at times it felt a little bit like the Avengers, where there's just like random cameos that, sure, they're fun, but they're not really necessary, and they're a bit like, what a small world, isn't it? Like, I guess Panem is not that, like, doesn't have that many inhabitants and everyone knows each other, but that's kind of weird. I also found it a little hard to visualize. I didn't think the imagery was that well done in this one. That being said, of course, as soon as I finished this one, I had to pick up The Hunger Games and started reading it, and I've read so far The Hunger Games, Catching Fire, and I'm halfway through Mockingjay, which I have stopped reading because I just don't want it to end so soon. The Hunger Games is one of my favorite sagas of all time. I read it when I was a teenager and I loved it to bits, and I love the movies as well. So the stakes were really high for me when I read Sunrise on the Reaping. I could say it of the Reaping. Yeah, at least it made me reread the original books, which is always a great consequence. And the last book that I want to talk about, I do have it here, and it's so beat. I love it. It's from the library, and you can tell that hundreds and hundreds of people have read this book. Look at how yellow it is. It's in terrible condition, and I'm just really one of those nerds who really likes a book way better the more beat it is. And it's, of course, Carrie by Stephen King. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly. I think, is it Carrie? Is it Carrie? I don't know. oh man, what's her name? And this is, of course, a really famous book. It was Stephen King's debut novel, and it's one of his shortest ones, I think. I don't know, I'm just making stuff up. I found it very surprising. I am not a fan of the horror genre, and all of a sudden this day, randomly I woke up and I was like, oh my god, I just need to read Carrie. I don't know why. Don't ask me things that I don't have the answer for. So this book you probably know already, but it's about a young girl who is 16 and she is bullied in high school, and one day she gets her period in the middle of gym class and in the dressing rooms, I think. And all the girls from her class start bullying her and making fun of her. And she has a special ability. She is a... and I don't think it's a spoiler because it's in the blurb. Wait, I'm not going to say much because I thought it was in the blurb, the detail that I shared, but it's actually not, so I'm not going to say it. I'm going to cut it. I really love this book, and I was very surprised because I didn't expect to love it so much. I knew it was a good book, or it was like generally known as a really good book, but I didn't think I would like it so much. Of course, it has bits that are a little bit outdated. It's from 1974. Yeah, there are things that feel a little bit weird to read, but it's very raw, it's very easy to read, it's very engaging. I really love that there's no heroes in this story. There's villains, there's worse villains, there's great characters, but there's nobody... well, there is a person that you're rooting for. I was rooting for Carrie the whole time. It turned me into a Stephen King fan. I had only read, the only thing that I had read by him before was On Writing, and I haven't even finished it because in that moment I was on writing very much and it was making me upset that I wasn't able to write. So I'm gonna pick it up again soon because I really loved the first like half, I think is what I finished reading. And that's about it. I don't want my batteries to betray me again. Twice in one day is a bit more than what my heart can take. Like I was saying at the beginning, I really loved all of these books. They are very... I would rate them really high, between like 3.5 and 5 stars, because otherwise I wouldn't have finished them. I do think that I am a lot more permissive? No. I'm more accepting of books that maybe are not excellent when I'm listening to them as an audiobook, because I feel like I can just zone out a bit more if I'm not super interested in that scene, and I just can't do that if I'm reading the book with my hands in my eyes. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this list and this review of my reads of the year. I would like to know, what have you read so far? What are you planning on reading? The one that I'm currently reading is Bury Your Bones in the Midnight Soil by V. Schwab, which started really well, and I'm like about 50% in, and it's dragging a bit. I am not super engaged. I'm actually kind of not... I haven't been reading it the last few days because... I don't know. I thought it started off really strong. But yeah, how about you? What are you currently reading? What are you looking forward to read this year? And did you read any of the ones that I've mentioned? Probably yes, because I had some very popular books here. But yeah, I would love to know your opinion. And please, yeah, just leave it in the comments. And I hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.